All righty, hello and welcome. I was feeling like I wanted to connect with some of you all, so I thought I would go live, see who's around, see if I might be able to help you a little bit. If you are watching this after the event, thanks for watching. And if you are here live, let me know where you're tuning in from. And let me know if you have a burning question that I may be able to answer. Welcome. Hello, hello, hello. Thanks for all the hellos. Good to see you here. I'm actually going to kick off. I got a question that someone had sent me on the back of one of my videos, and I thought, welcome. I thought I would just share this because I thought it was a good question. It's wonderful that you do videos regarding emotional intimacy, but you have that very little physical intimacy. And by the way, I apologize. I don't even know how to say this word anymore, right? Because I grew up saying it as intimacy, and now I say intimacy, and I get feedback from people. They say, Jack, why are you betraying your British roots? I'm like, this is not betrayal. This is speech accommodation. It happens if you live somewhere for a while. So we're going to say physical intimacy or intimacy, you choose. I know there are many emotional and physical reasons why a man can't or won't become intimate with their partner, but it leaves the woman feeling insecure, hurt, and abandoned. Is there something we can do about this? So I like this question, and I'm happy to riff on this a little bit. I'm just going to say a few hellos. Got a lot of people joining in. Thanks for being here. Coming in from the Midwest, Illinois, welcome. Texas, Mesa, Arizona. I was coming through Arizona recently. Boston, California, Dana Point. I was also there. That's cool. I like it when I know where places are. I feel a little bit more educated when that happens. And thanks for all the hellos and waves. Welcome. Missouri and Birmingham, Alabama. Welcome to you all. So this question here is about physical intimacy or the lack of physical intimacy and what can you do? So I want to draw a distinction up front, which is whether you're actually in a relationship or not, right? So, and I mean a kind of committed, contained relationship. So if the guy isn't being physically intimate with you and you're not in a relationship, that's actually really good information, right? That might mean that he's kind of has you in the friend zone and he's not thinking that he wants to have an actual relationship with you, right? So if that's the case and you actually do want to have that relationship, I definitely think you need to be engaging in some kind of conversation. And I wouldn't be staying connected ongoingly if physical intimacy isn't on the table and you want a kind of, full-blooded relationship. So, why might that be happening? It might be happening because the guy doesn't want a relationship. He isn't ready for a relationship. He doesn't think of you in that way. He's not sexually drawn to you, which might be really hard to realize, but it might also save you some pain in the long run. And so I'm going to distinguish that from if you actually are in a relationship and perhaps you got to the point where you're not having physical intimacy. You'll probably know this, that most of the time when that happens, yes, there could be some kind of physiological thing going on, right? There could be some kind of dysfunction that may need to be looked at. But that's not really my wheelhouse. What I'm imagining in this instance is that there's actually some kind of psycho-emotional stuff going on, and possibly some stuff that's happening in the space. So I would definitely encourage you to get support and reflection on that, because quite often what's happening in the physical space is a reflection of the closeness between you or the desire between you. And so there can be some really good things to discover there, even if it's sensitive territory, right? So it might need a little bit of exploration before it gets better. I wouldn't shy away from that, right? So if the guy is avoiding the conversation on that, at some point you have to maybe take your stand that this needs a conversation and to find out what would be the conditions to have that conversation, right? Maybe it's easier to have it just the two of you. Maybe it's easier to have it hosted by someone else, like a therapist or coach. Maybe there's just a time that you can set up. So it's good to find out what's a good time and way to talk about this. But I think it probably does need to be talked about. And it's also a good chance for you to honor yourself and notice, hey, you've got some needs in this territory. How can you communicate about that in a way that's not blaming, but that fully, owns your own authenticity. Got a few more people joining us. Welcome to Sydney, Boulder. Welcome, South Africa, Scotland. Awesome, Miami. Pretty diverse audience in the house. Love it. All right, give me your question. What's your burning question? Let's just imagine for a moment that you had a question that if I were able to answer it, or at least start to answer it, that it could make a real difference in your life. That's the question I want to encourage you to put here today. Let's see if we can make a difference in your life in this session. All right, so let me know if you've got a question. I'm trolling through here. What is the best way to get deeper with oneself, with deciding if you want marriage or not? Well, I'm curious what that would mean to you, right? It's, one of the advantages and disadvantages of the time that we live in a sense, is that there's a more self-authoring context that most of us find ourselves in, right? So it means that we actually get to decide what marriage could mean to us, right? Whether that's a religious commitment, whether that's a convenience, whether that's some set of values that we get. So I'm curious if you're deciding this in the context of a particular person in front of you, or if this is more like a hypothetical question that you're thinking, oh, in my life, do I want to get married at some point? Let me know if there's more context that I can help with there. I think there's also a stage for a lot of people where that's actually, it's kind of exciting to them to want to do that, right? To want to show up in that way or create that container with someone. Yeah, I've got more questions rolling in here. Why is it so hard to step out of a non-functional relationship? Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure if I knew the answer to that. Yeah, that's a really powerful question. I think it's super relevant to a lot of people. Yeah, I think there's many pieces to that probably. One of them is that, and I'm not a brain expert, but we've got these different parts of the brain, right? That they are actually different ages of the brain, right? From the stem to the limbic system, the cortex, the neocortex. So, where we kind of like rationalize or higher faculties of decision making is here in the in the prefrontal cortex. That might be having a very different reality than what's actually happening in your limbic system. And the challenge is your limbic system has to do with attachment, right? So oftentimes what's happening is you're getting attached, and it may or may not be that that's a good decision. In some ways, it's probably not even a conscious decision that you necessarily made. It might just be that if you spend enough time with someone that you like, you're going to start getting attached to them. And that's probably not to do with, is this a fun relationship? Is it functional, or any other dynamics that could be going on? So one thing that can make it hard to step out of a dysfunctional relationship is this sense of sort of false hope, right? That it might be different, it could be different, what if? So sometimes we have to really just drop story. Almost, if you've had this sense of a future unrolling, sometimes you have to almost just imagine it a bit more like a cliff, and you don't know what you're stepping into exactly. But it's almost like stepping into the unknown. And sometimes that stepping into the unknown is so arresting or scary that it keeps us locked into the thing that is known, because at least it's familiar, right? A lot of us can deal with really bad patterns because it gives us some certainty and familiarity, or because it reminds us of something that happened in the past. Whatever happened in the past with mom or dad or whoever you were raised by typically gets encoded as that's what should be happening, even if it weren't healthy. So maybe you're also picking up on some patterns of dysfunction in the past. The other thing that makes it hard is that sometimes the person you're playing ball with doesn't see it consciously themselves, right? It's really hard to get objectivity on your own relationships. So it's much easier to let go if the other person's like, hey, I think we need to let go of this, right? That's easier. If their orientation is what's the problem, they're dealing with the dysfunction or they don't even see it, that's a lot harder, because you, in a sense, then have to be the full repository of discernment and sobriety and boundaries. And, it's much easier to have a boundary with someone that also wants to have a boundary with you, So dysfunction can also be really arresting. It can be exciting. It can be painful. It can, and it can happen with someone that you have a really good connection with, right? So part of the sobriety is also acknowledging most of us, even in the context of dysfunction, it's not 100% bad, right? Those relationships probably exist, but mostly it's a gray scorecard, right? There is a real connection, or we do have a strong sexual connection, or we do have a history, or we have shared, a family, we have children, whatever's going on, there are ways that we are connected. And so sometimes it's about having the ability to sort of see all of that and still maybe make your decision, and have a really clear plan for letting go, right? So it's much easier to let go if if you're employing no contact, if you're getting support from someone outside the relationship, if you're thinking about what else am I going to be putting my attention into that maybe I haven't, right? Clue for most of us, that's going to be putting attention back into ourselves. I've done a lot of coaching in this territory. When people say, well, I've tried to let him go. When I dig in, often it's like, well, your version of letting him go was you stopped calling him, but he's still calling you, right? Or your version of letting him go is, actually we still have a huge overlap in our friendship network, or we work in the same building, so we see each other all the time. And sometimes it's really inconvenient, right? You have to disrupt other territories of your life in order to create the kind of separation that might be supportive to you. So if the first place to look is if you've really done the sort of separation plan, so to speak. If we were looking from the outside, would we say, okay, cool, yeah, there really has been a really strategic attempt to let this go. And also just realizing sometimes it's not easy. If it were easy, you would have done it. Did anyone teach you how to do it? Did you get the class on how to do it? We're all learning how to do these things that culture hasn't necessarily, or education hasn't provided us. So, cut yourself a little bit of slack, and normally your own spiritual liberation to some extent is bound up in there. So your ability to go no contact, honor yourself, invest in yourself, hold your boundaries, communicate what you need, say no, notice the phone is ringing and not pick it up. All of that stuff is actually probably in your favor anyway of your kind of direction of development. So yeah, I appreciate that question. All right, let's jump into a question. Thanks for joining us. We've got good representation from the Southeast here, Florida, Atlanta, welcome. Both if I want marriage in my life and with the man in my life. Well, it sounds like you clear maybe what you do want. So I'm curious if there's anything else that's perhaps holding you back from that. Have you been in the conversation? Yeah, they went no contact as their family will never accept me after years, breaking my heart. I'm trying to find the first part of that. It's definitely a skill to being able to pick up questions. Right. Just want you to know how much your videos about breadcrumbing helped me. Got rid of the breadcrumber. Awesome. And dating guy is much more invested. Love it. Great. Good work. Keep it up. Lisa says, I've been texting a guy for 9 weeks now. We have a great connection. We talk about meeting up to spend time after lockdown lifts, but neither of us have suggested a phone call. Is this all fake? Well, you tell me. I don't know. I'm curious what your intuition is. I will say this, right? When you're only communicating electronically, right, text or email, it's very hard to get a fully dimensionalized view of someone. That's just, I think, what it is. So it may be that it's fake. It just may be that we haven't actually explored whether something more real is actually here, right? Which is probably going to come through real-time communication, getting on the phone or video call, eventually meeting up in person, and having a number of those things, So what might be true to say at the moment is we have a good connection in the medium of text. And, generally if someone is keen to progress something, they might move it off of text within 9 weeks, right? So is this guy showing up as he's a real strong candidate for being in a relationship with? Not yet. So maybe there's more to go, or maybe you say, hey, do you have an interest in getting on the phone? And you find out. If he does, great, you know what it's like. And if he doesn't, then you might have to decide, is this something you want? And I know a lot of us are making these decisions in this context where you're like, well, but I also want connection, so it can be hard to say no to something like that, because right now, I'm hardly seeing my friends, let alone going on dates. So, you have your choice. And I mean that in a way it's most empowering, right? Sometimes just to really realize I do have a choice whether I continue to engage in this or not. And don't be afraid to ask the questions that would help you find out if something is more real there or not. You have to be with the fact that this isn't going somewhere. But if you can be with that, then you get to find out. I call this, not just I call this, it gets called, and I happen to keep calling it love of reality, right? Love of what is actually going on here. And the less I fear finding out what it actually is, the more I can empower myself to be at choice. So that's a good thing. But I remember, I can even think of people that I went to college with, right, who were super quirky in person. And, I love quirky. It's fine. I'm Brit. We've got plenty of quirks. But on email, this person came across so completely different, right? Like so funny and charming, but in person, they had none of that. And that's fine, right? It's like we have these different sides of us that come out. So that's the slight danger if we're only in electronic communication, is that I don't think we're really going to get to know each other at a deeper level, So sometimes you have to risk taking that lead. If the guy isn't, you say, hey, are you up for this? You see what comes back. Or you greenlight and say, for me, the next step now, having talked with you for 9 weeks, which for a lot of you wouldn't necessarily get to 9 weeks, I'd love to talk with you. Can you make that happen? And then you maybe step back. So you've named the desire, and you see if he can kind of step through the threshold. All right, let's see if I got another question here. What tools help build emotional intimacy? Presence, knowledge of each other's love languages. If you can, even a conversation about what is emotionally intimate to you, right? So, for some of us, we can have incredibly emotionally intimate experiences that are nonverbal. Right? For some of us, we almost need to be in a conversation together for it to feel more intimate. So I think the ability to, activate with someone, for a lot of us, what are the blocks to emotional intimacy, right? What are the blocks? So the blocks might be, I'm stressed. So anything that helps reduce stress, anything that kind of shuts the world out to some extent when we're together. Sharing experiences. Another block might be that we've got stuff that we haven't repaired. That's a huge one. God, I know how difficult it can be when you've had conflict or argument and we don't even know how to come back together fully on the same page. So I think just being honest about that, even if we don't know how to do it, it might be that we just name that, hey, there's a thing that we still need to metabolize at some point. We have the, tools or awareness to be able to do it. There's also another thing that I think has to do with whether you're a thinker or a feeler. I don't have the whole download on this, but I used to have this joke. I hope my dad's not watching right now. Maybe he is. Hey, Dad, how's it going? So I used to have a little bit of a joke with my sister that my dad, when he would call, his question would always be, where are you? Now, that to be fair to him, given that I have traveled a lot in my life and the world, sometimes I might surprise you that I'm just like, hey, here I am in this part of the world that you didn't even know I was in. So that's accepted. But for me, the question is not really where are you? It's how are you, right? That's like the, hey, how's it going? That's for me, that's a little bit of like just checking each other's worlds out. And for some people, they have a higher need for that. Like to feel emotionally connected, I need you to know how I'm doing right now. And if we've sort of jumped into a conversation and we haven't had that, it's going to feel less intimate in my world. For some people to feel intimate, it's almost like as long as we're in the same topic, right? So if we're talking about something where we can get a shared reality or it's of interest to you and me, it's going to feel kind of intimate. So again, I talk a lot about subjectification, right? So I'm not going to assume that what works for me works for you. So if I'm not subjectifying you, I might have the space within which I can get curious. How do you experience intimacy? For me, I often feel most intimate if we're together and we're in eye contact and we're actually not talking. And there's like that, for me, that there's those, I'll try and find this clip. There's a movie called Waking Lives. Some of you might, I don't know if you've seen it. It's it's not recent, but it's a really clever movie. It's one of Richard Linklater's movies. He's also did the, Before Sunset, After Sunrise with Ethan Hawke, which I love as well. So I think it's a film director in the movie. I mean, this is all animated, but he talks about this moment of connection, and then everything just stops behind him, like the clouds just freeze over. Those moments for me are incredibly precious. For some people, that's not going to be their thing. Like it needs to be a bit more spoken, or it needs to be more heartfelt, or like kind of more emotionally raw. So I think permission to discover between you what some of those things might be. All right, welcome. Welcome, Winnipeg, Canada. Welcome to you, Monique, for being here. All right. Oh, Brighton, UK. I do have a soft spot for Brighton, UK. Why do I have a soft spot for Brighton, UK, Jack? Oh, thank you for asking. Well, the reason I have a soft spot for Brighton, UK is because that's where my parents met when they were 18 years old. And I also lived there for a little bit, about a decade ago. So thanks for being here. Okay, let's try and find a question. Would this be a time, if this was occurring, for example, to ask ourselves whether we're showing up with an inviting, warm approach, or are we being too rigid without conscious awareness? Ooh, that sounds like an exciting question. I'm curious what the context is for that. Have you just mean sort of generally at this time? I think any time that you can notice what invitation you're giving to other people, and what is an authentic invitation? So I remember when I first started. You may know this about me, but I do a lot of walking, hiking. I love spending time in nature, and when I first started going on certain trails, I grew up in the countryside in England, and we talk about the country code, right? So if you walk past someone on a country road and you don't say hello, it's sort of you're less. So we say hello. That means you're okay. I'm okay. We're cool. We're good. So I remember walking on trails here in Colorado, and some people would be that. Some people would, the dog would introduce himself already. And some people would just kind of not even make eye contact. And it took me a little while to get with that program. And what I appreciate now is kind of feeling the choice about that, right? So there's some days where I absolutely want to engage with the people around me. And there's other days where I hike. It's almost more like an inward meditation. So if you're talking about in the context of dating, I definitely think being inviting and warm is a great strategy for sure. And even being willing to get feedback from people about, what is the impact that you have when you meet someone new. Yeah, I think it's a huge difference. And, for you might have heard this, but, for a lot of guys are attracted to, guys, hopefully that aren't in a relationship, they're attracted to more women than they actually make approaches to. And the subset of women that is much more easier to approach is a woman who's given you a warm invitation, even if that's not, hey, I actually have any interest in you, but just the smile can often just be the gateway to a moment of connection, which for me is connection, beautiful, whether it has to go on to a conversation, anything more than that. Sal says, we are 10 months into relationship. I started having nightmares where he starts talking to other women. In reality, there's nothing that points to that. Can growing feelings be a cause of fear? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, there's a certain power, right, in powerlessness when you've got feelings for someone, or you're in relationship, and they might want to stay in relationship, they might not. It might work out, it might not. Absolutely. So I don't think there's anything wrong about that. I think it's really great if you can, keep a journal by your bed. Just notice if there are themes that are coming through your dreams. The more you practice that, the more you'll probably be able to hang on to the content. You can also learn how to write without light. I'm not an expert at that, but you can improve that ability. Yeah, and quite often, our dreams may also just be picking up things that happened much earlier in our life. For some people, they may have been happening in other lifetimes. Jung talked a lot about this collective unconscious. So you're even sometimes dreaming things on behalf of all of us. So yeah, I would turn towards them, and it can also be interesting to get someone to interpret them for you if that's something that you're interested in. But yeah, 10 months is kind of like a bit of a threshold, because at that stage, a lot of the time you're going to feel much more in, and you might also feel more dependent. I'm doing so hard to answer phone. 11 years of toxic, need to heal again. Yeah, totally. I get it. So what's easier than not having to answer the phone is not knowing that they call, right? Which is the advantage of blocking someone. Sometimes blocking someone can be an act of real love. I even know there's some people where this is important enough to them, like they know this has been hard and it's kept them in a loop, where they actually will change their number. And that's actually worth it to them to update their number with other people so that they've got kind of like clean basis to proceed. When an old flame comes back to you after 2 years and says he realized he likes you and wants a relationship with you, how would you react? Would you give another chance? Yeah. Well, if you are interested, I would potentially be willing to give another chance. I'd be curious, obviously, what went down, right? Because sometimes there might be, betrayal or something that happened in the past that we also want to be in relationship with. I wouldn't be too fast to reignite the connection. I would take it slow and I would notice what's actually happening in front of you, right? If you're willing to go for coffee or let the person in some way, just to see, what's stacking up here. Sometimes people are interested in their old flame, because they've actually got some heartache going on. And so this feels like a place that they can go to seek support, So we want to know, is this like a real epiphany moment? And yeah, it absolutely is you. And so taking your time is fine, because if they know they really want to be back in relationship with you, you get your runway. In some ways, you determine the runway. How would I react? I would react however is authentic for you to react. So what's actually coming up there for you? Are you interested? Are you afraid? There's probably lots of things that are coming up for you. So create the space for that. And so there's different levels of would you give another chance, right? Would you give another chance could ultimately be, would you give them another chance to be in relationship with you? I think I would kick that up the road into the wings of time and the future, and I'd be focused on the here and now of, does it even work for me to go for a coffee with them? And I might go for a coffee with them, and I might not even reveal that much about my world. I might just be willing to give them a good listening to. Tell me, you're coming back here to say something. What do you have to say to me? Maybe you even get the right to interview them a little bit, right? What's happened over the last couple of years? What have you been working on? What are you realizing? Have you been in relationship? What went down? I hear that you miss me. What does that really mean? Because it's one thing to miss someone. It's another thing to have a deeper connection that really needs to be explored. So I think time will be your friend. Authenticity will be your friend. It's okay to feel confused. It's okay to be willing to go for a few coffees and then pull back and recalibrate. You have your choice. And also sometimes I think that the discernment can move, it's almost a different trajectory. If someone's coming back into your life that has been in a relationship with you, it's like, maybe we would date for a bit, but that we know that perhaps being in a serious relationship really is the proposition or not, right? So actually I set the bar in some ways a little bit higher than I might on someone that I've never met, because, we've already been around the merry-go-round once, so to speak. So yeah, thanks for that question. Hi, Jack. I take to win. Hi, Jack. Why can't you speak English today? Hi, Jack. I tend to wait a long time to get intimate with someone I care about because I'm always afraid they will lose interest after and not show effort. Yes, I hear you. And I think that's a common thing that people experience. So I'm a fan of you being able to tap your own guidance and discernment. Now, that's a nice fancy phrase, much easier for me to say than for us to do in practice. But what I mean by that is we don't necessarily concretize a rule where our own intuition and discernment might, in a sense, be our highest path. So the danger I've sometimes seen in this approach is, I almost hold that being sexually intimate is sort of like the reward. So I sort of hold it out that it's the reward at the end of a certain amount of effort for him. The danger could be with that I sort of see my worth somehow through this overly sexual lens, or that like that's the key piece, and maybe I'm tracking less what intimacy and connection is actually happening here, right? Of course, at some point for most of us that's going to be part of the equation, but just sort of noticing, like, how do I feel in his presence? Is he showing up? Is he coming towards me with some kind of consistency? All those questions are probably more important in some ways than whether we are explicitly sexual on a certain timeline or not. But I get it, and I get it. And, even I'm just trying to think, to share from like previous experience that I've had. Sometimes if there's a certain level of sexual interest or chemistry, it can actually be hard to get a read on what the real connection is. It's almost like, if that's in the system enough, maybe just speaking as a guy, it's like, wow, that can really be kind of like, arresting to my attention. It can be arresting in my physiology. So this is a little bit of a tricky territory. I think the right guy is going to get that this is, intimate and potentially sacred, and that it might also bring up some concerns, and might be willing to get with that timeline. So I think when it's the right connections unfolding, there's less pushiness from the guy. He might make it clear that he feels sexual towards you, and that that's a space he'd like to be in with you. But it's almost like, I think it's like it's sort of a little less important in some ways. It's like, what's really important for him is he wants to develop a connection with you. And of course, he might want that to be sexual, but there's a little bit more flexibility, I think, in the timeline. Whereas I think if the guy is really mostly interested in you as a sort of sexual connection, then there's more attention there. There's more urgency there in a certain way. I really just want to say, trust yourself, like that you might know, and that trusting yourself in this territory, you may occasionally make a misstep, and that's okay. You may retrospectively think, oh, actually, I took too long, or I didn't take enough time. That's okay. It's okay to learn on the job. And probably what you're doing, if you're going to err on one side of caution, is be slower. Again, if it's the right guy, okay, we took an extra month to be sexual, but actually here we are, 3, 6, 9, 12 months down the road, probably doesn't matter too much, So there can be a piece which is, do we have physical chemistry, right? That doesn't mean we necessarily need to be fully sexual with one another, but we might want to explore that, whether that's like a makeout or something that just lets us know, okay, is there kind of enough in this domain that it would make sense for us to be lovers? So sometimes you can approach it without necessarily being fully intimate. All right, welcome if you've joined us. Thank you for these questions. Thanks for being here. It's my favorite time of the day. It's 2:53 p.m., which they tell me is my birth time. But when I looked into it, parents couldn't actually clarify that. So I've always believed this is my birth time. We hope that's true. All right. So done with my ex. I'm reconsidering going through with my divorce. In your opinion, is that a bad idea? Got a little battery, 20% battery remaining. Okay. In your opinion, is that a bad idea? I'm doing so much better with zero contact thought piece. So I'm not sure if you are in the process of divorce and that's what you're reconsidering, or you previously thought about divorce and you're considering putting it back on the table. Just to know that you're doing so much better with zero contact. I mean, that sounds really important to me. So yeah, I mean, I don't know the full gestalt of what's obviously happening here, but yeah, no, noticing if, I mean, in any situation, if ultimately it's true that you do better single than you do in the connection, I think you do better single, So I think there's something that, I guess a little more complicated is when we're single, certain of our patterns don't get brought up, right? The patterns that exist in attachment, in connection, relationship with someone, the unfinished business of our childhood, it's often less going to present when we're single. So sometimes a relationship may be also difficult because it's bringing up some material that we need to look at, or we have an opportunity to look at. That can be a really hard discernment. I don't know exactly how you make that discernment other than, just journaling and tuning into your own guidance and kind of noticing. It also depends how important that stuff is to you, right? For some of us, being as free and authentic as we can in this life is important to us. I know it's important to me. So it might be that you're actually willing to take more kind of difficulty that comes up in relating, because you know that it's like your own mirror that needs to get cleaned. You know, I don't know how much that relates to what's going on here. I don't know if you're in the sort of relationship where that kind of work was even possible or of interest mutually. But I like hearing that you've been doing zero contact and that you're doing better with that. That seems important. All right. Let's jump in here. Hey, and welcome in the UK. How to forgive yourself for being vulnerable with the wrong person. I shared with him some very intimate memories and I regret it. Yeah. Well, one level, you know, don't be too hard on yourself, right? Like, yeah, we've all had vulnerability hangovers. You know, sometimes there's a moment where we share that's actually more about us than them. You know, they happen to be there, and that's when it actually was right for us to maybe explore something that was vulnerable for us. So I wouldn't be too hard on yourself, you know. Probably the question here is almost, how do you forgive yourself for anything? You know, how do you be compassionate towards yourself? You know, in my world, that's mostly about dialing down your inner critic, because your inner critic is the one that's going to be hard on you. You know, none of us is going to live a perfect life, right? Like, depending on how you hold perfection. I mean, if you hold perfection is everything that's done is perfect, you know. It's funny, I'm now getting memories. I studied Latin, and perfectus is Latin. So anything that's perfect, I remember my Latin teacher saying, is anything that's finished. But that's actually useful in this context, right? Because there's no such thing as we're all going to make the best decisions. You know, we're always constrained by our state, by our resources, by our histories, by our astrologies, by, you know, toxins in our environment. I mean, there's just so much that goes into being human at this time. So yeah, sometimes we make bad decisions, or sometimes we make decisions that were maybe fine, but they become bad because we're triggering a shame cycle, right? Maybe this is actually totally fine. And if you could soften on yourself, you might be like, okay, maybe I wouldn't share with him again, but it's fine. And, you know, at the end of the day, you know, it's good to be vulnerable, right? It's like, this is our life. It's precious. And if you were going to go on the side of being more vulnerable or less vulnerable, I would say be more vulnerable. You know, that's the, I mean, even if you look at gross collective level, are we not becoming a more vulnerable culture, right? I know that there's a lot of, you know, management on social media and on all that, but like, we share more of our lives, I think, than we used to. And I think men are becoming more vulnerable. I think women want men to be more vulnerable in relationship. I have a deep prayer that in my lifetime, I'll get to see politicians and politics being more vulnerable, rather than, you know, one-upmanship and teenage boys, so to speak, developmentally kind of shouting at each other. Yeah. So, you know, if I ended up being a bit vulnerable, you know, blessings to you for being on the right side of history, you know. And if I can't be with your vulnerability, that's kind of on me. And that might be painful for you if I don't provide a good space for it. But it's also, that's my own work probably, right? Someone being vulnerable with you can be kind of the most precious, beautiful thing in my view. And, you know, it might be that what's going to serve you going forward is just to notice, like, if you have a tendency to get really lost in your emotional state, right? If you get really emotional about something and then you might overshare, maybe that's just a little recalibration for you, or to really know that you do that in the places that it feels good, because there's a continuity of connection and relationship. But I would forgive yourself as much as you can, because regret is a really tough thing to live with. And permission to learn, permission to fail, permission to be human, you know? So you'll be all right. Happy morning, New Zealand. Welcome. Welcome. All right, I'm going to pop over here, see if I've got another question. My question is, I'm sharing dogs with my ex. I'm really struggling to move on because he's very controlling. Comes to walk them morning and night. Got it. Yeah, I mean, it can just be difficult, right? If you've got to share something with someone. I mean, if we look at this as an opportunity for growth, right? So we say, okay, so there's a person who's controlling. And so we say, okay, so what is my relationship with control? Was there anything in my past that didn't work about control, right? Maybe mom or dad were objectively controlling, or maybe I subjectively experienced them as controlling, right? I'll tell you, I've only ever worked for myself, really, bar like a few months possibly of a summer job that I didn't do that great in. Turns out I'm not that great at packaging and parceling things. So I definitely don't like that experience of feeling controlled. But at my best, I get curious. Okay, so if I'm feeling controlled, it might be that this person's controlling. It might be that I'm easy to feel controlled, right? In the same way that I say some of us are easy to feel disrespected. I am easy to feel controlled because I like freedom a lot. I've never wanted to really work for anyone. I've never wanted to work in a corporation. I love my time. I love that I can sometimes spend hours just wandering in the wilderness. So at my best, I notice it could both be true that this is a controlling person, but that doesn't necessarily mean I have to feel controlled. It might be that I have to name a boundary. It might be that I can also trust my judgment that this person is being a bit controlling, but I don't necessarily have to get triggered by that. That if I'm getting triggered, typically that's on me because I'm either understating my boundary or I have some kind of story that, this person's controlling me, and then I start to slip back and suddenly I age regress and I'm feeling controlled as I did maybe when I was younger, when I didn't have the full autonomy of being an adult human, right? So it might be that there's something in here that can actually be for you, even if it would be easier for you to have a less controlling ex, and I totally get that, right? What about if you came with your most controlling persona to the table? What would that be like? Maybe that would create a huge clash with him. I don't know. But maybe that might also empower you to be more sovereign. Use it as your exploration. That would be my thing, and it might be you also have a practical choice. Maybe in the fullness of time, it doesn't work for you to share them, or you have to do, a month on and a month off, and, you want to have less contact. But, life sometimes gives us these circumstances that aren't easy, but it can work us in ways that are for us, for our highest. All right, welcome if you've joined us. I'm live here. Thank you also if you're joining us from after the event. I'm taking questions. So if you have a burning question and you want me to answer it or do my best, I would love to hear it. All right. I've got a question there. Okay, so this is another question about controlling this, I think. How can I deal with an ex wanting my guy back without making myself seem needy or controlling? So I think what you're saying is you've got a guy and his ex wants him back. And how do you orient to that? Yes. So in an ideal world, he would be leading on that, right? Which means he would be receiving your influence, which might in this instance be, hey, I don't feel comfortable with this situation. So ideally, there would be some receptivity from him. And some leadership that might mean, if he's committed to being with you, then maybe this ex doesn't have so much of a role in his life, right? If he knows actually that she wants to be in a relationship with him, or he wants to be in a relationship with him, then he might need to hold an appropriate boundary there. So I just want to put that up front, that this stuff is easier when, let's just say that you could trust your guy fully to manage that. Now, ideally as guys, we say, hey, babe, trust me. Trust me, I'm a trustworthy guy. Why are you getting so upset about this? Be cool. This isn't a problem. Right? Now, that might be a guy's dream in a certain way, right? That you're not going to create any emotional kickback, problems, conflict, because actually you just trust him. Now, there can be a really powerful stance where you say, actually, I do trust my guy, but if you're seeing some things that are questioning that trust, and any of us that's human, and particularly probably if you're more in your feminine, there are going to be times where your trust level goes down. That's just that's going to happen in certain ways, right? Even if it's just a moment of contraction. So ideally, you would find ways to be able to communicate about this that aren't about getting into conflict together. You might have to risk conflict, but where we can actually hear each other. And generally as a guy, it's going to be easier for him to hear if you lead with your vulnerability. Now that might be really difficult, but if you say, hey, I notice I'm feeling a little insecure, that might be a better way in than, critiquing his behavior. Sometimes, the behavior does need to be mentioned, right? Like, I notice she's texting you really late at night. I don't feel super comfortable with that. Can we talk about it? And at the end of the day, I think the older I get, like, I think you have a right to be needy, in the sense, like, I wouldn't be worried too much about the appearance of being needy. I would care more that your authentic needs are getting met. And sometimes, we're all needy in certain ways. We all have insecurities. Show me someone that doesn't have any insecurities, and they're probably either not in a relationship, they're probably like a spiritual teacher in a cave, or they're probably in a relationship, but they're not really in the line. There's something that they're not actually putting on the line, right? Like, most of us at times are going to have some kind of insecurity. I think that's called being human. So, I take probably a fairly clear line on that. That if you are friends with someone, that the moment that you were available, or if you said, hey, it's on, that they would want to be intimate and sexual and be in a relationship with you, there needs to be an appropriate boundary in place. And that might be, we only see that person when we see them together. It could be that we downshift the connection with that person until they have a partner. It could be that I make efforts to introduce you to my ex, and so there's like a very clear, when we're together as a 3 or 4, whatever it would be, like, it's clear that I'm with you. So I'm probably a little bit more on the clarity is power end of that spectrum. And I do think when you're in a relationship, sometimes certain friendships or exes and things, they have to reconstellate a little bit, or basically it matters to me that you feel safe. Now, you could feel unsafe because of all sorts of hallucinations, right? All sorts of, unfounded concerns. But, in a way, being a good partner to one another is, I don't have to believe all your concerns are founded in the same reality that I roll in. Now, that's hard. And sometimes I've done a terrible job of this, where I'm like, well, if I don't, not in this particular line of inquiry so much, but if I don't see something's a problem, and I think I'm being really sober about that, it can be really hard for me to lean into that edge of, but this is a problem for you, so therefore it is a problem for me. I mean, I think that's when we're at our best. The challenge is that if most of us as men, in a sense, probably aren't secure enough in our own trustworthiness and leadership that it's okay for us to feel challenged about whether you trust us or not. Right? In an ideal world, if I'm really centered in my masculine essence, it's okay whether you trust me or not. Right? Of course, if long-term for us to be in a relationship, there's got to be some minimum effective level of dose. But I get that your amount of trust, right? If you've just had a bad memory of something that happened with an ex, or, like, it's your internal weather has changed, in this moment, you might want to test whether I'm a trustworthy guy. Part of you might even throw out a challenge to me, like we test the smoke alarms. You might want to challenge me to work out if I'm still trustworthy, because right now you feel unsafe and contracted, and you're trying to work out, do I feel unsafe because something changed in my internal weather, or because you've done something, right? And if you really want to depend on a guy, at times that's going to feel really bad, because he is going to do something that was a bit lame or thoughtless or lacked a little bit of integrity, right? That no one's going to have a perfect record on that. So yeah, I mean, this is important territory. I feel kind of passionate about this. It's not easy, but if I were here with him, I would want to say, hey, even if objectively speaking, some of what she's doing right now is a little, quote, needy, quote, controlling, let's hold the best line we can as a guy with integrity about how do you want to show up in this situation. And that might be that you're willing to work even harder to create the conditions for safety. And to you, I'd be saying, hey, how can you approach this guy? Let's imagine that he's already trustworthy, in the sense we're going to, have a little bit more of innocent till proven guilty. And let me imagine that he does care about me and my needs. How can I present them in the most hearable way, in the least blameworthy? Or even if I am feeling a bit controlling, let me bring that into the conversation, so I name it, so I own it. rather than it's sort of like in the undistinguished background. So, that might be best practice on both sides. And I know it can sometimes be hard. Lisa says, I love Before Sunrise too. Actually, I don't even know where I was. I basically found myself watching it recently. I think Before Sunrise is the first one, right? Where they like take the train and then they get off in Vienna or something. And yeah, it's kind of cool. It's a long time since I've been to Austria. So it's also kind of like a little bit of, romantic longings for places I've been in the past. Dear Jack, thank you so much. Sound advice, happy holidays, good health. Appreciate that. Thank you. Trust is difficult. Yeah, I think it is difficult. That's kind of true for a lot of us. And particularly because most of us have had it broken in certain ways, right? Or there's certain ways we don't trust ourselves, or we don't trust life. It's huge. I work with that theme a lot. Thank you, Jack. It was something to ask for a friend. Awesome. I appreciate you doing that. All right. Let me jump over here for a second and see if I got a question. I feel like I'm a great catch, but I never get any interest from guys, in person or online. I'm extremely resilient, but after years of this, it does get to me. Thank you, Jack, for your encouraging. Yeah, so you might be a great catch, right? Absolutely. And it might be that you could get back. It might not be easy to do. There are programs where this sort of thing exists. It might be guy friends even. Sometimes it can just be really useful to get feedback. Let's just say you're a woman that dates men, from some guys, and just kind of, it might be vulnerable. You might have to hear something that might be difficult to hear. But maybe there is something that's like a little bit of a block, right? Or where a guy is somehow not looking at you so much as a love interest, but maybe looks at you more like a friend or a business partner, right? Part of this typically can be to do with masculine and feminine, right? The polarity, and how much can you find your feminine essence, if that is your true essence, right? Not every woman has a feminine essence. Not every man has a masculine essence, but on average, most do. So sometimes the things that you've relied upon to raise your children, or be a single mother, or take care of your business, or be a leader in your organization, or just cope with being a person in the 21st century, sometimes those things aren't the same as being in your more receptive feminine. And receptivity isn't the only aspect of femininity, but it's one of the aspects that might most have a guy feel drawn to you. The masculine in him feel drawn to the feminine in you. So that can be one place to look. Another place to look can be, have I been holding my whole world up? Right? So sometimes if I'm super responsible, right, I have a great house, I can pay my bills, thank you. I have a retirement plan, I have a business, I have a career. Sometimes I'm so used to like doing everything in a super competent, resilient way that it's actually hard for me to receive, right? It's hard for me to let someone in. It's hard for a guy to even imagine, and this might not be consciously, but like where would he really fit in your world? Like, is there a way that you could receive from him? Is there a way that he could add value into your world? Is there a way that he could protect you? And you might say, yeah, absolutely. But I've had women who say like, oh my God, there's so many things that a guy could do for me. But my experience of being around them is that's not really obvious. What's obvious is you've sort of got it all together. You seem super competent. You seem super on top of everything. Whereas, if you roll it all the way to the other extreme, right, the archetype would be something like the damsel in distress. Now, I'm not saying you need to invoke that archetype, but it can just be useful to look at it and say, okay, so there's a certain thing that can get activated in the masculine when it's obvious that there's a way that he can protect you or serve you or show up for you. You don't necessarily have to be in distress, but you might learn to be able to sit back and receive and say, there's all these things that I can do for myself, but you know what? It's great when my guy or a guy could show up and do them for me. Now you might say, that's great, Jack. That's sort of down the line of relationship. I'm just talking about like, I want to get some dates. It might be that just what you could work with someone on this. That might be something that you could do. It might be that, there's a way that sometimes people can be almost friendly, right? That's how they date. They're friendly, but it's maybe that there's a cut of authenticity that isn't quite so true there. Like I go down the shops, I'm friendly, I can talk to anyone, but the way that I talk to them doesn't necessarily elicit more of the dance of the masculine and feminine, right? So sometimes you want to learn how to flirt, you want to learn how to tease, you want to learn how to be playful, provocative, maybe even have a little edge of your sexuality, right? So that could be another place to look, just like, how do I show up? Do I show up as sort of safe and trustworthy, but maybe there's a little bit less of my alchemy, there's a little bit less of my sort of in the moment dance, right? We're going to learn how to dance a little more. Rather than perhaps I have the same fixed distance with everyone that I meet. And people like me, but maybe there's like a level of being attracted to me, which is almost, I want to be more polarizing in a way, right? I don't necessarily want everyone to be attracted to me, but I want some people to be attracted to me. So maybe I need to take a few more risks there, right? I've studied the Enneagram a lot, so the instinct that's probably most important here is the sexual instinct. And the sexual instinct, obviously it has something to do with being sexual and sex, but really deeper than that, it has to do with the dance of attract and be attracted, right? So when a peacock displays its feather, or, I watch these David Attenborough nature programs, there's these amazing dances that happen in nature, right? When people, they're like mating dances, they're like colorful, they're exotic, it's incredible. And so there's something that we can sometimes learn from this. Sometimes we have to be able to show people our colors, and that can be edgy for some of us, where maybe having attention on us isn't easy. So I would just invite maximum curiosity. If you can be resilient enough to hear some feedback, that can be really good. Notice if there's an aspect of your own feminine that you might, even if you don't know if it's true for you, try it on. Like, what would it be like for you to, if it's the furthest thing from what you've known, what would it be like for you to be in the persona of the damsel in distress? It might feel really strange for you. You might even not have access to it, but even just moving a little bit on that spectrum, maybe there's something that can offer to you, right? And these are all personas and archetypes, right? We have so much complexity. So, just forgive me for I'm just highlighting one very small aspect of who any of you could be, and it's not who you really are anyway. It's just a way of expressing. But I put that out there as that's the flavor that for super competent, resilient women is sometimes the one they have less access to. So thanks for the question. All righty, let's see if we got another one here. Thanks for being here. I appreciate your time. Nice to be together at the end of the week. What if you acted childish to someone in the early stages of getting to know someone? Childish in the sense not being open for that person and narrow things with irony. Now I regret not being open to him. Yeah, so you can always loop back with people. I know I play a little bit culturally, slightly different rules than some people. In my world, fair game to say, you know what, when we were dating or when I, was hanging out with you, I actually think I was being a little childish, or I was using irony in a way that was deflecting intimacy, or, whatever's the best way of saying what you're talking about. And I regret it. And I'm wondering if you would ever be open to going out for another coffee, and I'll be on my best behavior. All right. You have to risk the rejection, right? They may or may not be interested. But again, I think when we get to the end of our lives, I don't know. Hopefully I'm not at the end of my life yet. I imagine that we're going to regret more the things that, where we didn't lean into our vulnerability and authenticity, So I think it's okay to be authentic and say, yeah, there was a way I showed up and it's not the fullness of who I am. And then, you can be at choice, but at least you've said your bit. If they still have no interest, then probably they're not a person that's going to be in relationship with you, right? Just probably, because you've given them another opportunity and they're not kind of taking you up on it. So, don't be afraid to find out the truth, right? The truth can hurt, but also deliver. So sometimes we have to step into that a little bit. Hi, from Aspen, Colorado. Yeah, that's beautiful. What do you do when your lover asks you, why did you catch feelings? I'm sorry, I don't understand that actually. Could you rephrase that? I want to make sure I understand that. Paranoia about unfaithfulness is like a waking nightmare. Yeah, paranoia generally. Let's scrolling. Jack, you're great. I very much appreciate your advice. You're really welcome. Thanks for being open to it. I told a breadcrumber that I was looking for a connection and would go no contact. I'm proud of myself. Thank you. You've helped me a lot. Awesome. I'm loving these kind of saying no to breadcrumb stories. If you've got one, feel free to share it. Awesome. It's okay to be wrong. It's just not okay to stay wrong. I never heard that. I like that. All right, Austria's in the house. We were just talking about Vienna. Hey to Graz. I usually get upset in the early stages of dating, most because I have high expectations of the guy to show that. Right. Yeah, I mean, this is a little simplistic, but just in case it's useful. The answer to low expectations is high expectations, right? The answer to high expectations is no expectations. That might seem a bit paradoxical. If you've had low expectations, low standards around guys, you want to raise your expectations, right? Raise your expectations about how much interest he's going to have, how he's going to treat you, and so on. And then at a certain point, you realize your expectations are still this kind of prison, and we might want the real freedom on the other side, where I just don't have expectations, so I can just literally see what it is. Right? Just if you're like, hey, Jack, I want you to watch this Netflix show, and I have no idea what it is, then I can just go in and be like, do I like it? Am I interested? Is it good for me? It's, my expectations aren't even part of it, right? So there's a sort of a freedom in working that if you can. And by the way, this is a really good inner work practice beyond the realm of relationship. It just serves us sometimes. We can be so used to living in the high of expectation, the valley of disappointment, the high of expectation, the valley of disappointment. Life is consistently letting you down because you have expectations, and your expectations are a projection on reality. They're not reality, right? Now, sometimes we fear that if we drop our expectations, we're never going to get excited about anything. And I would just say, run that experiment. You might find that you're more excited about certain things because actually you're actually really with them in a more pristine, clean kind of way. Now, that doesn't stop us saying, yeah, I want to go on holiday next year and I'm excited about it. Just maybe I don't have to, imagine I'm going to be doing this and this and this and this. And then when actually, I go there and the hotel and the pool is shut, now I'm devastated because I imagined I was swimming every day. It's like I can maybe learn to hold it a little bit more lightly. I love Krishnamurti in this, who was a spiritual teacher. Krishnamurti said, my secret is I don't mind which way it goes. And there's something so profound about that. And for a lot of us, that's hard because we imagine if we don't mind which way it goes, then we're kind of just a victim and we're passive. But it's a bit more of a dance. Like I might have, desires, but then I'm also just a bit more flexible. So expectations, yeah, it's a real spiritual practice, I think, to look at that and where that's sourced from. Hey, Jackie's live. Cool. Yes, I am. Welcome. And thanks. We've got a decent audience here. Thank you all for being here. I know some of you have been here from the beginning, or if you've just joined us, welcome. I'm going to try and get through as many questions as I can. We'll see how long I keep going here. I have got this also, I've got an Instagram stream here, just so you guys know, I'm on a 10-minute battery warning. So if I go down, you might want to come over to Facebook or to YouTube if you want to continue with the live. All right. What is your thoughts on oneself sabotaging behavior? Well, I think it's real. And maybe give me a specific instance and I might be able to, dial it in a bit more. There are many ways that we can sabotage ourselves. And sometimes it's about identity that we're trying to kind of stay consistent with. Sometimes it's because we don't deserve enough, so we have a deserve and worth issue. Sometimes there's a payoff that we're unconscious to. So it can be worth saying, okay, when I do sabotage, is there some kind of payoff that I'm getting? Okay, to continue this bit about expectations, I have high expectations on the guy to show me that he cares and he's doing everything to make me happy. I don't know how to change this. Well, is it a guy's job to do everything to make you happy? In one way, awesome. Like if a guy's working really hard to make you happy, that's great. But in some ways, what I fear when I read that is, we want you to be responsible for your happiness and for him that. So when I read that, I would get curious. Oh, do you sometimes do everything you can to make people happy? And is that true? I know, and sometimes it might be true that it's, yeah, absolutely. This is really important to me, and it's I'm in my center as I do it. The danger is that we could get into like our wounded server, right, or wounded helper, where actually, we're doing a lot to make people happy, but we're really ignoring our authentic feelings, desires, our energy levels, the season we're in. So, I want to show up and to care about your feelings and to care, full stop. But the way that a guy does that is probably not necessarily the core impression that I get when I hear this. Now, I know you're saying I'm working to change this, so I'm not trying to preach to the choir, but just I'm inviting the curiosity and the inquiry around, what is a guy's role? And, when we're trying to orient towards being authentic with one another, it's a little different than I'm doing everything to make you happy. And, how do you know if I care about your feelings, right? This would be ripe territory, I think, for subjectification. By which I mean, you might have a way that you show you care about someone's feelings. Maybe you're super empathic, and it's obvious that you're kind of effusive, or you drop your life and you kind of run and help people in certain ways. He may care about you in a different way. He may care about your feelings. For him, it might be that he's not trying to fix them, and that's how he shows he cares. Or he's willing to listen to you. Or at a certain point, he's not willing to listen to you, and he's actually going to get practical and make something happen. So I just know that it's tricky because a lot of women are sensitive in ways that as men we might never fully understand. Even as a pretty sensitive guy, I may not understand. So there can be a little asymmetry there. But I would want, ideally, your maximum curiosity about whether I care. And if you're encoding any of my behaviors as I don't care, I would love you to check that out with me. Like I noticed that when I told you about what happened with my friend, you didn't react that much. I'm making a story, or I'm making the meaning that you don't care. Can I check that out with you? Now, I know we often don't talk to each other that way, but that's a really powerful thing, right? To check out your world, make minimal assumptions, see if we can come into some kind of shared reality, because otherwise I might be doing all sorts of things which in my world are completely fine. They might be somewhere between neutral and loving. And in your world, I don't care. And now you're going to blow up on me about I don't care because you've got all this backstory that I wasn't even privy to. That's not a recipe for, relational ease. So if you're having the experience, even if you just said, I notice I've got real high expectations, right? I notice that I'm really tracking what you're doing. And it's really important to me to know that you care. That might just be getting a truth into the room, rather than that's all just kind of this filter that you're looking at things through, and he doesn't have any, awareness of that. And by the way, if, as I, maybe intuit, I may be wrong, but if you are more on this helper side, sometimes it's hard to help helpers because they're so helpy, right? So the dominant thing you're doing is you're already helping me so much. And I might have to almost fight a little bit to get in the ring of helping, and that might not be obvious to you because you're so wired to respond and help. A lot of guys aren't going to be as maybe responsive, so, they also, we just want to have a little bit of flexibility there, and, this thing about he didn't get back to me on time, that might also be a place that we vary. Ideally, don't vary so much. It's going to go into friction, but we might not have exactly the same level of responsiveness or be responsive to the same things, right? You might be really responsive when someone needs your help. I might be less responsive, but I might also, if you look at the pie chart of where my energy is going, I might put more energy into the relationship. You might put more energy into a variety of relationships. We might just be different in that way. My way of helping might be I take out the trash and I do the tax return and I make sure that you've got insurance on your. You might need me to show up and show my care in a very physical or verbal way, but just ideally we create the space to be able to receive in as many dimensions as possible and to receive help in as many dimensions as possible. I think that's the practice there. I love how you talk about doing the work. It's hard, but it's worth it. Yes, it is hard. I can say, and I'm sure I've got plenty of work to do, but it can be really hard. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that. Hi from Indonesia. Well, it's time to Bali. I also went to Gili Air, one of those islands that's to the east of Bali, which was really fun. Like they didn't have any cars. It was just horse-drawn carriages, which was quite romantic. And we actually had everything in backpacks. This is one of the places, for those of you that know my teaching partner, Clayton Olson, that's one of the places that we cemented our friendship. And, it was even before we started working together, spent some time in Bali. So happy to hear I don't know if that's the part of Indonesia you're in, obviously, but it's the part that I know. The question from Bruja. Am I saying that right? Maybe it's a bit more of a Bruja. Like, lover asks me why I caught. I don't get it. He tells me he loves me and that I'm his soulmate every time we're together. How could I not? I want to make sure I understand that, and I don't. My lover asks me why I caught. I don't get it. Could you state that? I want to make, or if someone knows, I'm a little bit behind the flow of the questions here, but I want to make sure I get that answered. And also, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate that. That's awesome. That supports the channel, so thank you. Her lover asked why she caught feelings for him. Yeah, I mean, that seemed like a great thing to me, to have feelings for someone. And is the issue that he's not reciprocating that, or that he's not declaring that? Sophie says, I've been texting a guy for, oh, it just jumped here. 1 second. I've been texting a guy for 3 weeks. We can't meet due to COVID. He agreed to a call for a second time, couldn't make it. He's been affectionate and respectful, but I'm doubting him. What can I do? Well, at one level, I mean, we don't necessarily have to orient with doubt, but we wouldn't orient with much certainty to a guy that we've been texting for 3 weeks. He agreed to a call, and for the second time, he couldn't make it. I would be doubting him. That seems really reasonable to me. Now, what can you do? Well, I think you can sit back and notice he gets a call on the schedule and doesn't. He's probably not going to be your guy. That's probably just the simple edge of this. And, to be your guy, he's got to do a whole lot more than just get a call on the calendar, right? But to even be in the realm of if that's a possible trajectory. So I get it, people are busy, blah, 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 but resourcefulness. It sounds corny. You gotta know that's Irish. I'm so bad with accents. He's like, you gotta have some. You gotta be resourceful. Let me just get out of the accent game. I think most women appreciate it when a guy is resourceful, and resourceful extends a long way beyond. Can we manage to make a call stick? So, yeah, you're not in a relationship with this guy now. Would I be texting him every day? That's where I might dial that back, because texting is in some ways the on-ramp to getting into more connection, which is typically going to happen in person or at least in real time. So if we never have in person or real time, I'm not available for ongoing texting, right? Some people are. That's okay. If you're happy, like, yeah, you know what, I don't even want to see anyone. I'm very, very COVID conscious, or, I'm getting out of something, or I'm just happy to have a pen pal, basically. Some people are. That's great. Be more, all the power to you if that's what you want. But I think you want something different. So then at some point you have to downshift on the texting to notice, is he going to upshift into a call? And if he isn't, you kind of have your answer, but you have to risk finding out. That's the difficult. All right, welcome to those of us who join us live. Hey, Toronto, Canada. Thanks for being here. Hi, Jack. I feel like an ass. I told this guy it seems we are on different trajectories since he has 3 kids under 10. He asked to meet me anyway. He's a super nice guy. He mentioned what I had said to him. Well, sounds like you were trying to be honest. Is that not the case? Like, I think it's okay. We might have different trajectories. He's got young kids, and that's not, of interest to you. It sounds like you maybe feel like you jumped the gun. I mean, could it be true that he's a super nice guy and he's got kids which may or may not be on your trajectory? Maybe we can just include that. Or if there's something that you need to say to him, you feel like you want to make a little amends or apologies, I think that's okay. Just a quick reminder, I've got a question here, or comment here. Hi, big hug from Brazil. Welcome. Jack, I love your advice. You're welcome. If you are here on Instagram, this is going to die, unfortunately. So if I'm still going, come and join us over on YouTube or on my Facebook page. Question: when do you have your own authenticity? When you have your own authenticity, you pay a very high price, but you can never forget who you are and what is your position inside the relationship. You have to be yourself always. Yeah, I mean, the other thing I'll say is, authenticity is a dynamic thing, I think, right? So the way that I might be authentic with this person might be a little different how I'm authentic with that person. Obviously, there's a kind of authenticity that's, perhaps innate to everything that we do. But different people bring out different parts of us. Different people bring out different personas. We have different histories. And also, if I'm going to be in a relationship with you for any period of time, we're probably going to change each other. And that's part of the beauty of relationship, right? Is that we can be open to that sort of change. It can also be challenging at times. So, this sort of notion of some people, when they talk about, I'm going to be authentic, it's almost like they're a statue that's fixed. And my experience is that we're much more dynamic and relational than that. So, yeah, and figuring out how to be fully ourselves and in relationship. I mean, I'll hold my hand up. I don't think I've fully cracked that. That's something we're all trying to learn, right? So it's good practice. They sometimes can be like a dynamic tension in that, right? That, wow, I want to show up in this role in this relationship, but I also want to be fully myself. It's much easier to be fully yourself in a cave in a certain way, right? Because you don't have, responsibilities, you don't have triggers, you don't have all the good things that are also part of being in a love relationship. So, yeah. Could my introvert and wall up make it difficult for me? I don't know how to trust again, like forever. Yeah. So I did a video. Actually, we have someone here from New Zealand. When I was in New Zealand in December 19, and it's about heartbreak, and it's about how to make sure that your heartbreak doesn't then cheat you from, kind of being in a right new connection. And, or, let's say heartbreak, like a bad experience with a ghoster or a breadcrumber, suddenly, you've got your walls up in this way that's actually kind of protecting you from the bad stuff, but it's also protecting you from the good stuff. If you've heard me before, I use this, biological metaphor, right? Which is selective permeability, which is what cells in our bodies do. They've got to work out what to let in and what to let out, or what to allow in or what not to allow. So the danger, we don't want to concretize cell wall, because now nothing that's actually meant to get in and out is getting in and out. We just want to keep the bad stuff out, so to speak. So is it okay when you've been hurt? Is it okay to take a moment and move slowly into a new connection? Absolutely. Do you have a right to be an introvert? Absolutely. That's going to be core to who you are. It might be that for some of us as introverts, we have to work just a little bit more on kind of putting ourselves out there at times, or making connections when perhaps our tendency might not to be. That's fine. That's part of the practice. It's okay to know not how to trust again. Like ideally, you might find someone that is worthy of that exploration, right? So then your discernment is this a trustworthy person in front of me? Can we have a trust-based relationship? That discernment will take time, right? But it also takes you trusting yourself, right? So I do really believe that trust is a start-at-home process. It's really hard. If I don't trust myself and my intuition, how can I learn about whether this is a trustworthy guy? It's like, well, I need to be noticing. Am I noticing red flags? Am I noticing good things? What's actually true in my experience? So the easiest way that I know how to trust is to go to work on your doubt, like doubt and fear, but particularly doubt, because fear fear and anxiety is a little bit more obvious to us. Doubt is much harder, I think, for most of us to distinguish, because it's, I doubt it's going to work out. I doubt anyone's going to want to be in a relationship with me. It's kind of like, it's pretty socially acceptable to be doubtful. It can just be quiet. It's sort of like a slight closure. It's a slight cynicism, but it keeps us safe, so this is what's difficult. It keeps us safe, but, I could be safe and never leave the house. But I'm not really safe, because the moment I then go out and come into contact with anything that I haven't had, if COVID's taught us anything, right? It's like, there's lots of stuff that's out there that we may not be able to see, but at some point I also need to like put my hands in the earth, right? And get a bit dirty. Otherwise I'm just going to lead this very limited life. So in the same way, you might over time just have to grow that sort of comfort zone within which you're able to interact with the world and come into contact with things, and then take the time to notice. And this, as an introvert, most of you probably have this gift, the ability to slow down, notice, and track what's happening and metabolize my experience, to actually notice, like, oh, did that feel trustworthy? Am I in doubt? Am I in my center? What's kind of coming up for me? I don't think you can learn to retrust from your sofa, right? So I think you're going to have to get out into the world, but I think it's also okay for that to take whatever time that it needs to take, you know? You're so genuine, Jack. I'm doing my best. Doing my best. Thanks. I just enjoy hearing your use of vocabulary. Well, particularly when I can pronounce the words. Yeah, it does help, doesn't it? So psychoanalytic. Right on. Okay. How do we determine to trust others? So maybe I answered that a little bit. You know, I think when it comes to trusting a man, I think the best thing is to look at his record, right? How do men trust men? And I don't necessarily mean men in relationship intimately with men. I mean, men who are working with men or have friends who are men. You know, we look at each other's track records, so to speak, right? So if this guy has 90% of the time has shown up, you know, when we go to make an appointment, he shows up, I'm probably going to trust him, you know? I mean, they kind of say you can, you know, trust once, and then if someone kind of betrays that trust, then then you maybe take a little bit of a step back. You know, it's the same thing. If I'm making an appointment with someone and they kind of space out, or they kind of a bit blasé about keeping the commitment, it's going to be much harder to get them back on my calendar, because it's like, yeah, that doesn't work so great in my world. So I think you kind of look at someone's record over time, actions, and you kind of notice, right? You notice whether other men trust him. You notice whether he has a trustworthy relationships with associates or family or other people that are in his life. You notice whether he, you know, most of the time, it doesn't have to be 100%. I don't know that. Maybe there are some guys. Maybe I'm just an inadequate guy. I don't know that there are many guys that have 100% record, right? That don't occasionally slip up or forget to do something or run 1 minute late or, you know, whatever. But most of the time we're looking at like a 90-95% kind of deal. Can he do that? You know, when he says, hey, I'm going to do this, can he make it happen? Or if he doesn't, does he renegotiate it or even just acknowledge it? You know, that's the pattern that I most obviously see that's a problem here, is when if you have to fill in all the time for his trustworthiness, that's problematic, right? If you have to kind of make excuses for him, if you have to like explain to your friends about him, you know. Now, if you're explaining to your friends is about his authentic essence, right? Like maybe he's a super shy guy or super introverted or like amazingly quirky or fill in the blanks. That's a bit different. That's like, here, let me help you understand this person. But if it's like, you know, babe, I'll get to it, babe. Oh, come on, you're making this a big deal of this, you know, like we'll do it. You know, there's a lot of like BS, basically, a lot of like, I've got all the chat, but I don't have the follow through. That's the one I want you to be wary of. That doesn't tend to go to a great place in my experience. So, but again, you got to trust yourself to notice that, right? Okay, let's be honest. This guy is a little bit of a BSer, right? Sorry to swear, but that's kind of what's going on. Can I believe that? Or do I have to sort of like hypnotize myself into imagining something else is true? That's when I start to get into problems, because now not only am I disavowing his trustworthiness, I'm not trusting myself. That's the biggest issue that I think, you know, if you can trust here, and you don't have to get it right every time, right? Sometimes there's someone where you're like, oh, I thought you were this, and actually you've revealed your colors. You know, we're all going to make miscalculations in that. But I think over time, you don't tend to make a gross miscalculation if you're trusting yourself and you're actually noticing his record. Okay, how to people, especially in the early phases of getting to know them when you are anxious prone? Yes. This is what we struggle with, and maybe I've asked before. Well, I know a lot of us struggle with this, and I get this kind of territory quite a bit. So, you know, it might be that you take aim at a certain schedule of seeing someone. You know, let's say you're kind of getting to know them. So you're kind of dating now. You might say, well, let's try and see each other 2 or 3 times a week, you know, whether that's in person or on a call. And actually, I'm going to cap it. That is what it's going to be. So, you know, for those other 4 evenings of the week or days on the weekend, I'm actually going to be doing something else called spending time with myself or spending time with other people. Maybe I need to put that on my calendar. So you have something that I can kind of take aim at that's kind of almost like my calendar, and the structure of our dating is regulating of this issue. You know, partly you may also learn how to take space yourself. Now, this won't work for everyone, but there are people who are more prone to be anxious who don't really spend high quality time with themselves. Like they may watch lots of TV or they may spend time on their own, but there's like a high, and you can watch great things on TV, but there's like a higher quality way of spending time with yourself where you actually get to know yourself, right? Where you journal, where you meditate, where you take yourself for a walk and you really notice, how do I think and feel? I used to quite often have clients set up like a snug space, like a space that, it's got blankets and cushions and cuddly toys or whatever allows you to kind of almost curl up with yourself and get a little bit more intimate with yourself. So that can also help. Basically, the more I understand my own need for space, it's much easier for me to understand yours. I may not have the same need, but at least if I'm on the same spectrum, it's a little easier for me to be in relationship with you, And if you're getting really anxious, you can also practice reaching out to other people that you have trusted relationship with, right? Like, hey, I saw him yesterday, 2 days, I want to kind of take him and only seeing him every 3 days. So I'm calling you, friend. Can you kind of talk me down a little bit? Or can you just be with me in my discomfort? So you get support, and you let other people know what you're taking aim at. It can be difficult. It's good practice. My breadcrumb story, a guy set a lunch date with me and it didn't happen. He texted me 2 weeks later asking if I went to lunch. I also was telling him that I've been to many lunches since. Awesome. I like that. Got this image of you with your lunches. Wow. Those were the days. So I'm you're finding me, I kind of got moments of nostalgia here today. So I want to honor my mum here. My mum made me lunch for school, packed lunchbox for whatever that was, 14 years. Never didn't have a lunch made by my mum. It's probably why I'm gluten-free now. A lot of sandwiches. All right. I hum to stop some of the anxiety about the person because I catch myself thinking about them constantly. Again, whatever works. Yeah, if you've got a little, mantra thing that you do, a thing that you say, a thing you hum, a thing you sing, a way that you, I don't know. I can find just sometimes like pinching a little bit. Just pinching my fingers can be kind of like self-soothing for me. Find out what's self-soothing for you. Can you speak to forgiveness of betrayal? Yes. So I think it's good to forgive. Forgiveness isn't necessarily that I'm going to have you back in my life in a specific way, but you benefit from forgiving, right? You benefit from finding forgiveness in your heart and letting something go and moving on, right? All relationships are going to have some forms of betrayal, right? Whether it's just a micro betrayal, right? It was so for that month of work that I kind of did overlook some of the needs, right? Whether it's like a macro, maybe this is not the right words actually, micro, but like, a major betrayal, right? Like I was intimate with someone else. It's going to be part of the territory that we're going to need to forgive each other and find repair. But we want to find it authentically, right? So I might have to take responsibility for something if I was the person that betrayed, right? I might have to take ownership of what I did and also the impact on you. You might need to reveal to me what the impact is, and I might want to listen to that, right? So part of the repair is almost like the I've been thinking of collective processes where this has happened en masse, right? Like collective reconciliation and somewhere like South Africa, say, where we've got to actually bear witness to what has happened and speak it and be able to hear it from one another. I can then be a choice. Do I want to rebuild trust with you? And what would that actually take? Right? It might take that we live together for the next 30 days, but we're actually not going to be physically intimate. Right? It might take that we need to have this conversation every weekend for the next 3 months. I don't know. So you don't try and make it impossibly hard, but you try and authentically as possible name what actually do you need, right? And maybe we negotiate a little bit, but probably if I've been the sort of perpetrator, I might want to cut you some slack and find out what you need. Now here's the shift that I think a lot of us don't think about in this. If we want to get off the victim triangle, so to speak, then there's not only a perpetrator and a victim, right? There's a relationship that has a systems dynamic. And sometimes in a betrayal, you might also, even if you're the one that was betrayed, you might want to own your part, right? Maybe you haven't been giving much attention or affection to your partner, right? Maybe there's ways that you've pushed them away. Maybe you're self-oriented in certain ways, and yes, we've kind of been doing my hobbies and I've sort of not been attending to your hobbies, whatever the situation might be. Or when we spend time with your family, I become a little bit oblivious, and I actually need to take ownership of that I need to give you a different place in my life. Or when we're with your friends or your coworkers, or whatever it is. So that can also just ease the dynamic, right? Because now we're both taking responsibility, even if we, it's not everything's 50-50, right? Sometimes it can be 90-10, but let me take my 10 and speak that as well. Trust can be also like a really beautiful thing. It can be really difficult, you've got to decide if that's worth it. But I'm saying I think forgiveness is nearly always worth it, right? I mean, I was listening to a podcast the other day where, a woman had been like horrifically assaulted, and she found it in herself to forgive the person that did that to her, kind of getting that like it was their own pain and wound that caused that. That might be a really difficult place to find, but there's sort of like a truth in it, right? Like, hurt people. So if I've betrayed you and hurt you, there's probably my own kind of wounding programming somewhere in there. Maybe there's even a place where in time you can forgive and have compassion. Having compassion doesn't mean I need to have you in my life. It might be that I have a really strong boundary, but I'm compassionate from afar. But to the extent that I carry kind of darkness in my heart, that's bad for me, right? That's the problem with not forgiving, is that it tends to erode at our own foundation and heart openness. Let's have a look over here. Don't be so hard on yourself. Yeah. Lucky to be born happy-go-lucky, very strong emotionally, but after I've lost my man to a murder, I've lost interest. How do I find that? Wow. I mean, gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That sounds so difficult. Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what you've gone through. So I'm just gonna yeah, maybe it's okay to have lost interest for a bit. Maybe there's other things that you're having to process and be with. I'm sure there's a huge cycle to something like this of grief and anger and sadness. So my hope for you is that you're getting support and plenty of it. And I mean, I'm curious about your question in the sense, part of me wants to say, trust yourself that you'll know if you do have interest, that you'll know. So maybe it's just not the season for that yet. If somehow you feel like it is, and, you're sort of struggling to activate that, yeah, I mean, maybe that's something that you could also explore in the context of support. I don't have much experience with what you're talking about, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but I kind of offer you my prayers. And sometimes being strong emotionally means asking for help. Sometimes those of us that are most strong emotionally kind of most need to do that. So I apologize, I've just lost that stream. What a tender moment to lose that in. But I hope that those of you that were here earlier do come across and join us on Facebook or on YouTube. Yeah, I just maximum permission to be in the season that you're in. That's what's coming up for me. Oh, my heart goes out to you. Okay. I'm going to see if I've got any other questions. Hi to Australia. Welcome. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I have a lot to learn about this and being okay with the fact I do have some tendencies and not reject myself, if that makes sense. Yeah, totally. Show me someone that doesn't sometimes reject themselves. But that's, for some of us, that's like a really profound path. So I encourage you in that direction. I'm seeing a guy for the past 4 months. He's being respectful. We did dinners at his house, going out, COVID limited, but he seems guarded and not affectionate. How can I bring this up to him? Yeah, so I would lead with what your experiences. So when he, quote, isn't being affectionate and is being guarded, what is happening in you? That's what I would lead with, right? Like maybe you feel disconnected, or you feel lost, or you feel uncertain. So I definitely start it with your experience. And then maybe there's a request, like, maybe you want him to hold your hand, or put an arm around you, or snuggle on the sofa, or, you tell me. But maybe there's something that could be like an easy invitation to him to see, is that even a realm that he can engage with you in? And if it's the smallest invitation, and you maybe have made it more than once and he really can't, then maybe that's also like not going to work for you, because it sounds like you're probably quite affectionate and you might benefit from having a minimum effective dose of affection. So I would assume that there's not something wrong with him. I would just, again, if you can, find your maximum reveal and curiosity and take it from there. You could even at some point, like, I don't know what happens if you go to hold his hand, and you could maybe even ask permission. Like, I'd love to hold your hand. How would that be for you? So that you're getting some information about what's there for him. But 4 months, that seems a decent amount of time to kind of want to be affectionate with someone. So I like that you want to bring this up, and I hope that in doing that, you actually get some more clarity and maybe even some more closeness. When you're ready to forgive, it sets you free. Absolutely. Be happy on your own. When a man does something that makes you happy, then you're happier. Great. That's a succinct way, I think, of saying what I was taking aim at. Hi from Heather near LA. Welcome. I've really only been dating the last 3 years after being in a relationship for most of my 20s. I've honestly experienced every single guy situation you've mentioned in your videos. All helpful. Thank you. Got it. Well, I'm glad that we're kind of, you're putting up what I'm picking. You're picking up on a beat the piper, pick the pickle pepper. Focus, Jack. I'm glad that you are picking up what I'm putting down. Angela, you're cracking me up. Yeah, I think I'm cracking myself up. How do you help your guy become a better kisser without offending him? Well, that's an interesting question. So, one piece might be that there is perhaps no objective standard on kissing, right? So it might be what you're actually asking is, how can he become a better kisser for you, right? For the things that you like. And that might also be something that you would offer back to him. But even just framing it that way, now it's not sort of, well, I'm a good kisser and you're not, and you need to kind of catch up to the program, right? It might be, some people like really kind of aggressive kissing, right? Like they like jackhammers. They like people really sticking their tongue down their throat hard. Some people, that's like completely their worst nightmare, uncalibrated. So I'm only putting it out there as a little bit of an extreme example, that there's people that like different things. So this might be about you noticing, hey, is there some things that I want, and how can I communicate my authentic desire? Maybe I would like him to slow down. Maybe I would like him to take a mint or brush his teeth. Maybe, you fill in the blanks. But I think so much of this isn't just about technique, right? It's about the way that you approach it. And ideally you approach it with maximum sensitivity and also with maximum curiosity, right? We're two people learning to kiss better together, I think, is a better frame than I kind of know what I'm doing and this guy's a bit of a loser, or some version of that, right? There's got like a bit of harshness and a bit of judgment behind it, rather than some openness and some curiosity. And one thing you could also do is you could maybe set up like a practice session where for a certain amount of time you get to basically say, hey, I get to turn all the dials, right? Like faster, slower, wetter, drier, whatever you like, more nibbles, fewer nibbles. But then also maybe he gets the same. And so you might find out something about that. Like maybe the way he's kissing you is the way that he would like to be kissed, right? Or not, but it might then just make it a an exercise in mutuality, and I'm a big fan of that. I think when it's like a man or a woman sort of has a complaint that their partner isn't good at kissing or sex, I'm kind of curious about that sometimes. It's almost a little bit like, who made you the authority on that? Maybe there's something we can both learn. And it could be a deal breaker, right? Like it could be that, because you've kissed enough guys to know that there's guys that are great kissers and you kind of know what you like. And if that's important enough to you, then that might just be a deal breaker. But I would love the vulnerability of the exploration if it were possible. Gail, thank you, Jack. I've certainly learned tons from your videos from North Carolina. Awesome. I love hearing that. What do you recommend doing if you find that you're constantly uncertain in a relationship and aren't sure if you want to commit? How to get certain? Yeah, that I'm sure is something that a lot of people can relate to. So, permission to have your uncertainty, I think, is number one. So it's okay to be uncertain. You can also turn it over a little bit to life, right? So, hey, like, I would welcome more clarity here in either direction. That can almost be like your prayer. You're asking life to give you that. And if it does, great. And if it doesn't, it's sort of like, okay, well, maybe this isn't the one I'm going to feel certain about. I would obviously get curious about your relationship to certainty in other areas, right? Is it common for you to feel certain? Are you typically doubtful or apprehensive? Again, full permission to be. But is this like a domain-specific thing, or is this a sort of all-life thing? I also wouldn't be afraid of having the conversation, right? Sometimes there's a deepening that can happen with someone because we're actually in the exploration together. Particularly if we can be okay with sort of the authenticity of the other person. Like, yeah, I have some doubts, because in my experience, oftentimes, a bit like the inner critic, actually, and the structure of doubt and the structure of inner critic, I think they're closely related. Your doubt can pick up on partial truths. So you might be doubting something that has some validity to it, right? Like, maybe our work schedules just don't really mesh, right? Like we're sort of passing ships in the night, right? Or maybe one of us is more keen to have a life of travel and one of us isn't. Or maybe one of us wants a family and one of us doesn't. Or maybe one of us already has a family and the other one doesn't know how they feel. Or whatever it is. It can be worth sort of getting to the truth under the doubt, because I don't necessarily have to hold it with doubt, but I might want to listen to the thing that's there. In the same way, my inner critic might say, Jack, you're completely underprepared. That might be true. I don't necessarily need to hear it with this sort of taskmaster tone, but okay, yeah, you're kind of right. Like, I probably should get on that. Like, I need to prepare for it. So, I say that to like allow you permission to unpack what might actually be there. And maybe you can also give yourself a timeline, right? Maybe between you might have a 6 or 12-month timeline where we're actually going to explore what commitment we want, or maybe I do that on my own side. I'm exploring that. There is a thing that some people try where they like act as if. So they sort of say, well, I'll actually try it on for the next 3 or 6 months. I will just act as if I'm completely committed to this relationship. So I won't think about it, not being in it. I won't give myself a backdoor out. I'll stop all the machinations. I'll just say that for the next 6 months, I'm going to be in this relationship, and try that on for size. That can sometimes be a way of moving you out of the sort of habitual stance of ambivalence. The advantage of sometimes inviting your partner into it, what we don't want is just that one person holds all the doubt in the relationship, right? One person is like, yeah, I'm in. The other person is holding all the doubt. It's generally better, I think, if both people can hold some of the doubts if they exist. Not that we want to multiply each other's doubts, but just if one person's really clear, sometimes almost by the nature of a systems dynamic, it's going to be that the other person might just happen to be a little bit less certain. And if you can't explore it with your partner, even if you can, I'd also explore it somewhere where there's no impact, right? Like with a coach or therapist, that you can just actually fully give a voice to, like, okay, if I were a no to this, let me just fully have my no. I'm a no because, and just get it out, get the fullest version of it out, so that it, it's almost like you cough it up so that you can kind of take a look at it and see what might be there. So, all right. Thank you for all these questions. Getting to see if I got someone. I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit here. I'll try and get through to the end, but now you're going to get hyper, Jack, because at some point I might need to watch the sunset here. And I'm also noticing that I'm kind of getting in the dark. All right, welcome if you just joined us. I'm doing a kind of live Q&A here. Welcome to those of you on Facebook as well as on YouTube. And if you're joining us after the event, thanks for staying here. I appreciate it. I appreciate all this engagement. I always do a background check first. Very good. Except he lives in Florida and I live in New Orleans. We just started talking, dating app. We have chemistry. Thank you so much, Jacko. You're welcome. You're reminding me that I don't get called Jacko that much, but I did have a nickname, Wacko Jacko, in university. So clearly people knew that I was a bit quirky then. All right. Hello, Jack. One thing I find that I continuously secretly battle with as a woman is this conflicting idea that I'm continuously told as a woman, you're the prize. Act like the queen. If you want to be treated like a queen, act like Prada. It's high value and never goes on sale. You can't wait forever to wait for a man to ask to marry you. The list goes on. I feel empowered for a few minutes, only to feel frustrated, conflicted, and somewhat artificial later. And of course, angry at men, almost as if I'm putting up a guarding wall. I hate feeling this way. Where and how do you find balance in relationship? How on earth are you supposed to experience more ease and fluidity with your partner if you're constantly told to act this way? I am with who I believe to be a wonderful man. For 4 years, we're both in our 30s. I think we have a future. However, it feels far away due to him wanting to feel better about finances and our location being very expensive. And I think we have something good. I don't want to feel concerned that if I continue to do kind and loving things for him, that giving too much or being too wifey before marriage. Got it. You got a lot of things that you're working with there. So just to take this in one vector. So, and I'm not trying to say that I know what your experience of this is. In life, I think we're going to hear lots of things, right? There's going to be lots of cultural axioms. There's going to be messaging. There's going to be messaging for women that you're going to be much more attuned to than necessarily I am. None of that is a substitute for your own guidance, right? So it might be that even just outside of the domain of relationship for a moment, your journey is going to be about, can I learn to really tap my own guidance? Can I be in touch with my own discernment and intuition? And probably what's going to happen is there's going to be a committee in my head of all the things that I've heard, right? Act like a queen, do this, do that, advice from friends, colleagues, coworkers, parents, my school teacher. And it could all be kind of jumbling around there. And even some of it could show up like, for you to make a decision, you need to kind of appease these different voices. Maybe some of it shows up even as like your inner critic at times. So all these things you're listing here, in my world, they're partial truths. There's something that might be true about them, but they're very far from being the whole enchilada. Part of being a mature adult in our development is we have to learn to be with more complexity, learn to be with more partial truths that sometimes don't easily go together, right? Like the danger if you act like you're the prize is sort of like you might hold yourself back in certain ways, right? Or you might have this view that you're almost rewarding or chastising certain behaviors in him, right? Which might set up a dynamic that's not actually the dynamic that you want. Being empowered is tricky. Sometimes these statements like act like a queen, I could be empowered, but I could also be so sort of rigid with that somehow I'm actually not really being myself. And I kind of feel restricted. Is it true that we treat people how to treat us? Yeah, there's some truth in that. It's not the only truth. It's almost like again, like high standards solves low standards. And at some point we need to move beyond standards. Like Rumi would say, I'll meet you in the field beyond standards. High expectations solves low expectations, but at some point we need to let go of expectations. Being a queen, so to speak, solves the problem of being like, I don't know what the opposite would be, being a doormat, right? Like, or letting people treat you badly. And at a certain point, you're more than a queen, right? That there might be times where you want to be in another archetype, right? Or you want to be in no archetype. So, people who walk around wearing Prada generally probably have some attachment to it, right? They've probably got a little bit of identity invested in it, but maybe it's better to wear Prada than rags. It's a solution to that problem. But at some point on the journey, we have to kind of realize that life is more than a handbag, right? Or a brand, or there's like deeper, more authentic stuff to come through. So all of this is, pointing at, you've got to find you in this, right? Prada isn't, act like Prada. It's almost like, I've seen people get themselves in knots where they are, is it many hands make light work or too many cooks spoil the broth? Like, how do I deal with this? And it's like, well, these are all they're all partial truths. They're all axioms. There's a context within which one of them or other of them may or may not apply. But life is so much more rich and intrinsic than a particular pithy aphorism, right? So they're little handholds, but you're climbing an entire wall. So you're going to need your own scaffolding in order to get up that wall. And that's where I think balance is, right? It's like I'll learn from anything and everyone, but I'm not trying to patch every little truth into this amazing mosaic all the time. It's like, just trust that when the right thing, it kind of almost like it will come to you, like in certain circumstances, you'll just know, yeah, this is where this saying might apply, but I'm not going to try and live my life by other people's teachings. And, I might sound a little bit hypocritical here, right? Because I teach on YouTube, but if you spend all your time listening to all of us on YouTube, you're going to have a hard time squaring all that, right? Because the place that I'm talking from isn't the same place that Matthew Hussey's talking from, isn't the same place that Helena Hart's talking from. We're talking about the same sorts of things, but from our own experiences, from our own consciousness, it's like there's lots of difference in that. If you're trying to patch all that together, that's like a day job you don't want, I don't think. I think you just want to notice where's their resonance. You might resonate with me a lot. You might resonate with me a little. You might resonate with some of my teaching, not all of it. Kind of trust that, you're your best teacher, so to speak, right? You know what you need, and it's different in different cycles and seasons of your life. I don't know personally if I have too much of an issue with giving too much. I don't want over-giving to be your strategy, right? The way that you lose presence, that you feel like you've got to give some more, and that maybe that's about I need to be liked, or maybe it's about I need the person to give to me, so I strategically indebt them to me. Like, get conscious about what's happening there. But I think generally giving is a great thing in relationship. And if someone's like, well, I don't want to marry you because you're already too wifey. I mean, like, wow. I mean, it might be happening, it might be possible, but that seems like a slightly bizarre perspective as I'm reading it right now. So no one can tell you how to feel and act, right? I mean, I can, and people do this, right? You should be ashamed of yourself. You should feel this. You should feel that. But that's subjectification. You shouldn't really, I think, feel anything. That's what I would say. Let's feel what you're feeling, what's true to you, what action is true to you. I'm much more interested in that than what other people are telling you to do or feel. So in a way, I want to give you the maximum permission to not listen to other people. Or maybe say it like this: you can hear them, but whether you listen is a different thing, right? Like, I can hear everyone, like, thank you, thank you, thank you, hear it. But whether I listen in that deep way that I drink it into my heart, that's a very different thing. And I almost get the sense that less is going to be more for you, because you've got too many things that are drowning out your own conversation with yourself. I hope that's helpful. All right. I said I was going to pick up the pace, and then I've been talking at length. Look at me, lacking integrity. That's so interesting. I love affection and cuddles. My partner is mega demonstrative. And when I commented on how much I appreciate that, he was like, of course it has to be this way. What a revelation. I tolerated an 18-month relationship with a man who wouldn't even hold my hand. Wow. Even though this is so important to me. What a lesson in knowing what you need and having the wisdom and strength to hold out for it. P.S. Love these crazy accents. Awesome. Thank you. So, all right, just on the accents. Now I am getting nostalgic. I did do some acting in my high school days. Not extensively. I was a little bit more of an academic sports player with a little bit of music sometimes, but probably my sport was stronger. But I did like doing school plays when I had the opportunity. And in one of my roles, I was playing an Indian. I don't even remember much about why or what the role was. I just remember I had a turban. I mean, this is probably stuff that nowadays would be completely politically insensitive. I'm not even sure. So take it with a grain of salt. But I remember, I had my turban and I was doing my Indian accent. And what I found out is that, at least in my world, if I do my Indian accent, it's very easy for it to become Welsh. I don't know if you know this. So it's like, I don't even know. I don't even think I should try this. I think I'm going to get too many lawsuits. But anyway, know that was my experience. All right. He loves me so much affection. I want to continue to do the same. Yet I find that this is something that has begun to weigh on my mind regarding everyday decisions in our future. Not sure what the lead-in was to that one. Oh, it was the previous question. Yeah, I hope. Yeah, what I want to say is you strike me as really responsible. So I want to encourage you to embrace your carefree side. It feels like life could be a little bit of a burden and a struggle, and I know that experience. And I know it can be helpful just to go a little bit easier on yourself. Like almost life is going to help you make some of these decisions. You don't have to make every decision for yourself. Life helps you make them because, after a while, certain information comes into your field, right? Certain doors open, certain doors close, the season changes, something becomes clear that wasn't clear. So, life and time are often your friend in these decisions. Don't take it too serious. I know these, big decisions about, do I want to be with this person? But there's also like, life will take care of you. Sometimes what you think was a terrible decision, it turns out in your favor, so remembering that there's stuff above our pay grade. You don't have to be religious or spiritual necessarily to believe that. Just there's more going on here than just you and I at the conscious level of our decision making, I think. Any insight on the male perspective? Okay, I'm actually not. I answered that at length, so I'm going to go to someone else's question here. My boyfriend and I are wonderful, loving, but I will never understand why he will not take off his clothes when we make love. I haven't come across that. Can you ask him? Again, you could lead with a reveal, like, I notice that when we make love, you don't take your clothes off, and boom, what do I feel? Do you have something that comes up for you there? Do you feel less close to him? Do you feel confused? Like, maybe that can be a lead into the conversation. Maybe he doesn't feel comfortable being naked, right? Maybe he's got some body questions or images, or, there could be lots of things there. So I'd lead with curiosity if you can. New Zealand says hi. Well, hi. My soulmate died 34 years ago. Oh, wow. I'm meeting men now in their 60s who have no experience of depth or self-awareness. How can I radiate my worthiness and attract an aware man? Yeah. Well, I will say in my experience that the pool of aware men, I think, is growing. It may not be growing as fast, possibly in the 60-plus segment. I'm not sure. But I know that there are lots of men that are taking their work more seriously, their inner work, and they care about that. How can you radiate your worthiness? Well, I think the best worthiness is actually somewhat intrinsic, and it doesn't necessarily have to be advertised. It's almost like a deep knowing that I'm worth it. I'm worthy. I'm worthy of attention. I'm worthy of love. I'm worthy of being alive. I'm worthy of my own authenticity. So I think when it gets to the point that life isn't a constant referendum on your worthiness, that it probably radiates somewhat or always already, even if it's not loud, like a guy will just kind of tune into that. And then you have to take actions that align with it, right? So that you notice, okay, this is a guy, I appreciate him, but he doesn't probably have the kind of awareness that is going to be important for me in partnership. So I'm going to honor my own worthiness and say thanks, no thanks, and let it go and move on. Where do aware men hang out? Is probably a question I'd be asking. Do they hang out in certain training seminars, groups of practice, spiritual circles, meditation communities? Are there certain apps that they use? There's obviously like apps like Meet Mindful, for example, who are going after the more conscious, mindful segment of the dating space. I think that's actually headquartered down here in Denver. If you're in the bookshop, where do the aware men hang out? Do they hang out in metaphysics? Do they hang out in the Enneagram section? Which I'm grateful that we have a bookshop here that has an Enneagram section. That I would be in that sort of inquiry. Am I putting myself in the places where I'm likely to meet those kind of men, right? If I'm going to a bar, are there certain bars that are like, maybe they're serving more conscious, healthy options, So I would probably be in that kind of inquiry. And trusting yourself that, to be honest, resonance again is probably going to be your friend. You're probably going to resonate more with a guy that has a certain kind of awareness. So maybe you can just trust. I wouldn't be afraid of meeting unaware men, right? Generally, my thing in dating is, you can give 15 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour. It's like, I don't think most of us are so busy, particularly during COVID, that half an hour is so devastating if we don't meet someone that was worthy of the time. It's sort of like, no, I get to practice and I get to also kind of maybe say no, and that's actually good. So I wouldn't be afraid of meeting unaware men. I would just notice where you have your resonance. Preach, friend. Thank you. I like that. Thank you, Jack. Thank you for advice on just taking my time. I'll be healing before being interested again. Yeah, awesome. You're welcome. Refreshing. Good. Let me scroll here. I'm just going to see if there's questions. I might not be able to get to all of these. When I try to do a Welsh accent, I sound weirdly Pakistani. Okay, we have a similar issue. I love both accents, but can't do them to save my life. No, I'm not sure that I can do accents to save my life. Which quality should I look for in a man? Yeah, I mean, that's a broad question. You know, if I was just going to shoot from my hip, I'd say look for a guy who's in his heart, because I think the best way of discerning do we have a connection is do we have a heart connection. And a guy who's not in his heart, you know, a guy has a right not to be in his heart, but he's probably going to be more prone to hurt you if he's not in his heart, right? Either not being able to communicate what he's really available for, or just, you know, hearts are what attune and sensitize to other people. You know, that's the awakened heart. So I would say a heart-centered man is a pretty good thing. And then we also want the spine, right? By which I mean some integrity and some backbone, some ability to stand in his own power, name his truth, claim what he's truly about. That sort of balance, I think, is a pretty good thing to start with. And I think it's pretty hard for a lot of us as guys to be both in our spine and in our heart. There's already a bunch of work that goes into that. I've been curious, are you willing to share your age? Is this rude to ask? I apologize, just wondering if you're a Gen Xer like me. Now, I'm 37, I'll be 38 in summer. Which sort of makes me like, you know, on a really good day, if I dress really young, I can sort of claim I'm a millennial, but I'm sort of like Gen Edge, depending on where you kind of draw the edge of that. He had a breakdown 2 years ago and he was ill. I think that relates to the clothes on in the bedroom. Yeah, maybe there's some sensitivity there. How can you tell if a guy is not in his heart with you? Well, some of the qualities of heartfulness include authenticity, sensitivity, attunement. So you might start to notice, like, is this person attuned to me, right? Is there like an actual, I'll give you another example. You might have had the experience where there's someone that's talking, maybe they're sharing a story, and it almost wouldn't matter whether you were there or not, right? They're telling their story, they've maybe like a little audience is gathering. It's kind of like the storyteller or sage energy, and it can be beautiful. And it can also have an unconscious expression where it's very impersonal, like almost I just tell everyone the same story. And I'm not really attuning to like, oh, you're in front of me, a particular person who has, you know, it's a particular moment. You know, the moment might call forth something, or your interests or desires might call forth something. So I think you notice if someone's in their heart by whether they are sharing, is there vulnerability, is there authenticity? Can you feel them? I mean, some of us find that easier than others, but you know, yeah. I'll give you an example. Yeah, I think this is just around the corner, actually. So if the Academy Awards, right? Sorry, I'm kind of like, I'm doing this dark light thing. So I probably won't win an Oscar, but if I were to win an Oscar, I'd be doing an acceptance speech. And what you notice, or I notice amongst acceptance speeches, is some of them seem like they're really from the heart, and some of them don't land in my world as particularly authentic, right? They're kind of a bit hackneyed, or like, oh, you know, I'm sort of so effusive, I'm thanking so many people, but me personally, I don't really feel it as true. It seems like a little bit more of a show. That's one way of showing if someone is in their heart, right? Is that there's a sort of authenticity. You kind of know it. Even if someone isn't eloquent, even if they are, you know, limited in their words and vocab and how they speak, that you can tell sometimes when someone's just like, they're just talking from their heart because it lands as kind of real and true. So that's something that you can pay attention to. And you can also notice, how does your heart feel around them? Do you feel opened? Do you feel closed? Do you feel connected to? Do you feel disconnected? That's what I would be paying attention to. And then there's, also when I'm in my heart, generally there's a quality of like caring, right? Like I might, care about my conversation with the server, or I notice what's happening around me. Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's almost an ability I probably somewhat rely on without necessarily consciously thinking, how do I do that? But it seems kind of important to me. Yeah, when I'm in my heart, I'm more aware of my impact. I'm more available for impact. Is consistency the big one, Jack? If they like you, they will be consistent no matter what. I think if they like you and they want to be in a relationship with you, they will be consistent no matter what, unless they communicate otherwise. So what I mean by that is, there might be some circumstances in my life that have me not be consistent, right? Like I might be working offshore. I might have a family member who's in the latter stages of their life and I need to look after them suddenly, but I can probably let you know that, right? Like, hey, I've really been enjoyed dating you. I'm not going to probably be that available in the next month because I'm actually going to fly back east and take care of my parent, or whatever the story is. So that's a little bit of a qualifier. And there could be a guy that's really consistent with you, but isn't right for you, right? So obviously you just want to emphasize you have your authentic choice in this. But I do think consistency is important. And I get worried about things that become less consistent, right? Because consistency could be I see you every night. Consistency could be I see you once a week. Once a week might work for you. Once a week might not work for you. But if I used to see you once a week and now I only see you once every 3 months, that's a problem in the context of if we're trying to pursue a relationship. So, yeah, and when I talk about consistency, ideally we're also talking 3, 6, 9 months, right? Because I might be quite consistent with you for weeks if I'm interested in getting to know you. For a lot of guys, we then get to a threshold moment where it's like, actually, I want to stay on or I don't. I might suddenly realize, actually, I don't want to keep investing here. And that can be really confusing because you're like, wow, he was so consistent for 7 weeks. And then almost now, like, I barely hear from him. And I wish as guys, we were better at communicating what's actually going on there. But just realizing that for some people, until they are really committed over a decent length of time, they might just be committed to the exploration, not necessarily the ongoingness. And I might not even be able to articulate that to myself as a guy when I do that. So I know that can be a bit confusing. I've been confusing in the past to people in that way. And it's just, again, not subjectifying, just realizing that your process and his process might be different. So we do look for consistency. And we also look for some articulation at some point of where he's at. Not just one time, but over time, right? Where he's like, yes, I do want to be in a relationship with you. Yes, I want you to be my girlfriend. Yes, I want you to meet my family. It's like we're kind of checking for all those things. Yes, it does relate to that. Okay, got it. So he had a breakdown in his illness. Yeah, so I don't know if I have anything particularly wise to share about that other than it seems like sensitivity would be a good thing. I wonder if there's a safe place for you to explore that, perhaps with someone else, like a coach or therapist. Yeah, it's not a specific thing that I've come across. Again, just in this line of work, I would always be encouraging you to lead with your reveal. If there's an impact that it's having on you or a desire that you have, I get why that might be a barrier to a certain kind of intimacy. But I sense that this might be above my pay grade in the sense that I don't know what sort of background or condition might most engender that. So just kind of wishing you ease and sensitivity with it. And I obviously want you to get more of what you want. I hope that's available. Hey from Paris and hey from Cyprus. Awesome. Welcome. And Candy, thank you. Thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate that. All right, everybody, this is it. I'm wrapping up. So if you've held on, if you've got something that you need to share or if you say or ask, this is it, because I am going to be wrapping up here really shortly. If you've stayed this long, wow, we've been going over 2 hours. Thank you so much. Thank you for those of you that have sent a super chat that supports the channel financially. I super appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for all your questions. We've had some really good ones here today, all over the board, which I love. I will just mention a couple of things if you're not aware of them. If you want to be on my mailing list, the quickest way to do that is to download the He's Your Guy checklist. And I'll just stick the link here in the chat. If you're watching this after the event, it will be the first link under this video. It's just becomingtheone.us/checklist. And I think I actually have the technology. There we go. To put that up on the screen. So get that. It's basically my way of supporting you. If you've got a guy and you're thinking about, is he investing in being in a relationship with me? I've got 9 checkpoints, and he kind of needs to get through at least 8, if not 9 of them, to really be a genuine contender, in my view. And even that, we don't know where that's going to go. But as I say, I used to play soccer. I don't play it so much, really, because I've had a lot of musculoskeletal issues. But I do play chess. And I say, if you want to play chess with me, you've got to get on the board, right? We need to both be on the board to play. And I think it's a similar thing with relationship. If we're going to pursue a relationship, who knows where that ends up, whether we're for a season, whether we're for a lifetime, whether we're for a reason. But we both need to be on the board. We both need to be playing. So this is my way of saying, is the guy playing? And sometimes it's easier for me to be a little bit more objective about that than you, because I'm not subjectively involved in the relationship. Oh, Candy, thanks. I appreciate that. Wow, thank you. That's your second one. I so appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Claire, thank you, Jack. You're great. You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Until next time, Tove, thank you. Nature is free. You're a good man with lots of wisdom. Thank you. I'm doing my best. Yeah, I appreciate this work because I feel like you guys, in some ways, you get the best of me. You don't get my moods and triggers. You get my kind of like inspired sharing. So I just want to put that in there to balance up the picture. All right, guys. Well, look, thank you so much for being here. Subscribe to the channel. If you haven't subscribed, I'd love you to subscribe. That will also be linked beneath this video, or you can go to bit.ly/Jack Butler subscribe. That will also notify you. Here's the advantage of it. I don't have a set rhythm where I go live. If you want to be live with me regularly, you can come into the Becoming the One community. We still have the $1 trial that I can put up here at the bottom of the screen. I go live there every month, and it's advertised as a set time. Here, I sometimes just spontaneously go live when I get the impulse to join and share with you. So subscribe to the channel, download the checklist, and if you want to do the $1 trial, grab it while it's still available. Thanks for all these comments. Thanks, Jack. I'm certainly picking up what you're putting down. Peter Piper, certainly picking up what I'm putting down. Thank you. P.S. Hope you made it to the South Island. You know, I didn't. But the reason I didn't was also unexpected and a little bit tragic. I had to go back to London to be with someone as they were passing. So the whole thing was cut a bit short, and was also meant to be in Australia, but the wildfires were going on, and I have respiratory sensitivity at the best of times, so that was like a no-go. But it's definitely marked. Like I would love to get back there at some point. I was recently in Kauai, in Hawaii, and that reminded me a lot of New Zealand, although I wish we'd had the sun that we had in New Zealand. So yeah, love it down there. I hope to be back. Thank you, Jack. Fabulous. So grateful for you. Blessings. Nice to see you, Jack. Have a great weekend. All right, you all. Have a great weekend. Thanks for being here. I'll talk to you soon. Jack.